success philosophy. Hello, everyone. So excited to be here, especially with my good friend and cohort, Jason Girardo. The word of the day or the term of the day is success. Love to hear what everybody has to say or think about it. Chat's wide open. We rely on chat to make us relevant and hopefully provide some quality takeaways that you can actually put to work and see value out of. So with that, I'll switch it over to Jason. Jason can give you a little update. It's been a few weeks. Last week we weren't here because of Thanksgiving. And, if you don't know Jason, you definitely should. He's on LinkedIn and is accessible to individuals who have questions or have some sort of interest in communicating with Jason. With that said, Jason, why don't you share a little bit about yourself and your first take on success?
Good morning, and talking about success and not success. My internet this morning does not want me to succeed, and my camera is having issues. But, part of, to segue, part of success is being able to take those lumps and keep moving, going towards your goal. I was reading this morning, I always look at the definition just to kind of have an idea of what the universal idea of the word that we're going to talk about is. And I was very interested to see that, not only was it talking about basically just talking about goal achievement, the definition, but the other, or making a lot of money. And I thought that was really interesting. But the reality that I'll start with, and I see I'm having some issues with my internet, but the reality that I see is that success is based on your internal guide. What do you consider success? We have a mutual friend that's not feeling well today and is sick. I think they would say success would be being healthy. When Maslow's, hierarchy of needs, as you fulfill those needs, then you have the opportunity to go for more, and success becomes a bigger, more abstract picture. But sometimes success is just getting up in the morning. Sometimes success is having food to eat. And if you recognize that and you are grateful for what you do have, you could build from there.
Yeah, that's so true, Jason. And, everything is relative. So what success for some person may be lack of success or disappointment for someone else. But I believe success has to be based on things that are sustainable. Right. People have the ups and downs and the highs and the lows, and they never get balanced. They're either overexcited or underappreciated or underwhelmed by what's going on around them. And sometimes, it's the opposite of success is failure, but there is no full success or full failure, because only through failure do you learn, and you learn more intently as opposed to superficially or frivolously. And, you start to understand what is important in life and in your own life relative to success. So there's a lot of people who, if you measure them on whatever scale you want, they could be super duper sports stars making umpteen millions. And meanwhile, they've just had 3 divorces and kids are in rehab and you name it, versus someone who's just living on a beach, having a ball, and enjoying life for what it is. And I think, including nature in your success principle makes a lot of sense. So, to success is something different to everybody, and it probably should be, but I think success has to distill into happiness, because if you're successful but you're not happy, you tend to be missing the point, or you're out of balance where you're just putting too much time and attention into something that isn't returning the satisfaction and happiness that you would like to have. So it's an ongoing, you're never there. Right. You're always in process or on your journey. You may be ahead of the game or behind the game, but I think the most important principle is playing the game and playing it with good intention and with purpose. And there's a lot of people who don't even know how they got to where they got, but I mean, they might be happy to get there, but they also know they can't actually replicate it. Right. So in your life journey, Jason, when did you start to identify success possibly differently than you might have initially?
It's interesting, and as you said that, it just brought something to mind for me. And we're all family here, and so open and honest conversation. I believe in that, and that's maybe we'll say something today, then hopefully that sparks something in someone else. And this is going to sound egotistical. This is going to sound horrible, but this is what it is. This is my reality. I've been really good at a lot of things my whole life. I've been a B plus player in pretty much everything I've done. I've been a B plus player, A minus. Some things. There's a couple things in my life that my callings. My being a healer, being a photographer and a writer. I'm pretty good at. I think so. But it's a blessing and a curse to where I've had these abilities, and things have not come easy to me. But my mindset has made it appear that it comes easy to me. And through that, though, growing up, success was something that I was like, oh yeah. And then I would be like, well, I would get pretty good at something, and then I would stop it. I'd be like, I'm good enough. I've reached a level of success, a level of success that I'm comfortable with, and then I would stop, never fully realizing how good I could have got with something. But it's like, let's move on to something else. And part of that is I like, my mind works that way. I like to do different things and learn different things. And I respect people that are the best in their field, and that's their whole life purpose, but that's just not my calling. But beyond that, so I've always judged success in a weird way. It's been like a soft goal to me, because it's like, get good enough and then try something else. Where as I grew up and got older, I started looking at, paying attention to what I truly wanted to do. What really made me happy? You talked about happiness, and happiness is the goal in and of itself. The quick side story I share that one of my teachers told me is that, if somebody passes away and you're at the funeral and you're like, oh yeah, that person was really rich, you can say, oh, but were they happy? But if someone passes away and you go to the funeral and you're like, oh, they were really a happy person, you could say, oh, that's great. They must have led a wonderful life. So, and I know Socrates and Plato, and they've all said that. But just as an aside, finding that happiness. So for me, it's finding what made me happy. And then, as you said, Don, how do I define success within that? And so that's been part of my journey as well. And honestly, I probably in the last 10 years have my eyes really started to open to defining success in a way that led to my happiness. You start off life defining success kind of by what you're told, what you model, your imprint, your model, so forth, the stages, and you see those people around you and you're like, oh, well, that's success. Well, I want to do that. And then you get older and then you react. Usually you're like, oh, forget them. I'm not going to do what they did. I'm going to do something totally different. I'm not going to go in the family business. And then later on you find out, well, it was probably a good idea to go in the family business or not. But you define success that way. And then you get older. And I think it comes at different ages for all of us. You realize, well, I could define my own level of success. And that's kind of what I do with clients, is help them clear out all those past filters of someone else defining their success and letting them define it. So kind of a long-winded answer, but for me, it came later where I really was able to say, okay, what makes you happy? What's going to make those around you happy? And what's, to your point, Don, sustainable? You can have those short bursts of happiness, and that's great. That's something that's very important, is to be grateful for those and to acknowledge them and say, yeah, that was a wonderful day. That was a great moment. And then you start putting those moments together, and that leads to success. And so that's kind of been my journey with that term and in my life.
Yeah, you give me so many great talking points from what you just said, because life is not an outcome, but a continuum.
Right.
And unless you measure your success with your failures or your failures with your successes, do you get a true picture? Because you could be sky high when things are working well, and then really down in the trenches when things aren't. But when you take into account, the pluses and the minuses, and just the ability to wake up every day and have the freedom of health, an opportunity to do whatever you want. And now the responsibility is on you. It's when things are taken away from you, especially unfairly, that you feel disadvantaged. But if everybody can start tomorrow fresh, and there are people who have done better because of failing.
Right.
What I've learned, there's a saying, smart people learn from what they do. Really smart people learn from what other people do. And by diversifying, like, for a long time, I take my 3-mile walk every morning, and I was listening to music, and then I got tired of music. So I started listening to audibles. And recently I got into autobiographies. And through learning from other people's situations and lives, you find out they're not that much different. Most people came into the world just like you did, had, let's say, average situations like most people, and somehow through fortune or through hard work, they were able to overcome and really overachieve. My last 3 was Al Pacino, which was interesting. Then I did Sally Fields, who growing up with the Flying Nun and with all that stuff.
Yeah.
And then now I'm into Leonardo da Vinci, who is an 18-hour Audible.
Wow.
And it's fascinating because if you can transcend time frame, because he was born in 1452, lived, I think, to about 1518. But it was just amazing what he was able to achieve in his lifetime, from being an engineer, an artist, you name it. He was doing it with limited knowledge and access to technology. So how someone could invent so many things was incredible. But you start to relate to that person, thinking, after a while you start to align with what their thoughts were, how they got there, and maybe you can derive some lessons to be learned for yourself. And again, being modest, learning how being humble goes a long way. And that's another issue is some people forget where they came from and forget what they had to deal with when they get on top.
Right.
And other people are out there and saying, hey, someone gave me a shot. I'm going to go out and start giving other people shots at opportunities, and including people. And also, and you've mentioned that before, you want to go fast, go by yourself. You want to go far, go with a group.
Right.
You don't want to be the smartest person in the room if you have a choice. You don't want to be the star of the show if you can share the billing. Because it takes less responsibility and it's more fun. If you're always striving, if you're never happy, that's a mountain you may never be able to climb. And it just lends itself to, disappointment. And I'm sure people who flame out, it's that whole 27 years old when so many great artists have passed away. Amy Whitehouse, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, just on and on. And you say to yourself, boy, maybe it would have been better if they would have been less successful for longer, right? Because they would have had to work harder. They would have had to be a little bit more directed. You never know what you don't know. And that's the beauty of it. It lends itself to so much uncertainty. Whatever you have today, you could lose tomorrow for no fault of your own or for fault of your own. And whatever you don't have today, you can find tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I think the key is where are you and what do you need right now? A nice hot meal for a hungry person is worth more than $1 million if you're starving. We've got Carrie here. Don't want to forget about Carrie. Hear about the electrical plug getting in trouble. They're grounded now. And also Carrie says hello to us. So one thing Carrie does do every day is show that comments do work and people are watching. So thank you, Carrie, for that. And, life is all about community, and it's about participating, because, a person who's a hermit never goes out, never works or plays with people. is at a severe disadvantage from an outsider's viewpoint. From their
Right.
own viewpoint, it's just perfect and it fits them. And I think that's where not having judgment comes into play. Because on the outside, you say, oh boy, look at that house they live in, or look at those cars they drive. But, you know, how much happiness is there? I remember my cousin who came to this country with $20 in his pocket and is now, you know, significantly wealthy, came over for a visit, and he was talking about just visiting a friend who lived in a compound. I mean, a huge gated multi-room mansion.
Yeah.
And he was telling me how many kids are in rehab. The guy's on his third divorce. I mean, he's got terrible health. And I thought to myself, you know, the richest house in the neighborhood is the one with the most love and laughter inside of it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because that's something that's very rare. And also the other thing about success is being happy vicariously through other people's success. So when my wife is really doing well and successful, it actually makes me happier than myself, right? Because I can appreciate what goes into it. And you don't want to be the star. You want to be the co-star. So many people are just leading actors and don't know how to be a supporting actor, you know? And sometimes it's better to sit in the background, and especially as you have family and you celebrate their successes, whether they're graduations or marriages or whatever, you know, there's a sense of pride. And I think pride has to come into play when you're talking about true success. Is, you know, some people got there for the wrong intentions and purposes. You know, I mean, if you're robbing banks and hurting people, it's kind of a, you know, a bittersweet pill to swallow, knowing what it took to get there. And at the same time, some of the greatest teachers in the world were people who had nothing. Mother Teresa never had any wealth, and on and on and on. And it wasn't necessary, because at a certain point, a guy told me early on, he said, a rich person is a person who has $1 more than they can spend.
I like that.
Anything over that is just insecurity. Like, oh, if something happens, I need $1 million. Oh, if something happens. Well, if it happens, great, but what are you going to preoccupy yourself with? And the other thing, the only thing everybody has that's a present is the present.
Right.
You can't, the past is over, the future is yet to come. And if you preoccupy yourself with 1 foot in the past and 1 foot in the future, you never live a quality life. So I know you're into really helping a lot of people, especially on mental health issues and quality of life issues. What are you starting to see more and more of in this ever-changing time?
I think what we're seeing, and you know, COVID brought a lot of this stuff out, and I'm hoping we don't forget the good lessons from what we went through, because it was a horrible time and a lot of people lost their lives and shut down economies, and obviously we all lived through it. It was horrible. But I think it caused people to do exactly what you just were talking about, is to step back and to say, how do I define success? And to, you know, we have these old dialogues. I don't mean to keep going back to this, but we have these old programs that are running that come from other places. The past generations told us, well, this is what you do. But what we have to look at is that these past generations don't exist in the world that they existed in doesn't exist anymore. So as an example, work life. You know, the gold watch doesn't exist anymore. You put in 25 years with a company and they pat you on the back and they give you a gold watch and they send you off with and you have a retirement fund, you have all this stuff. And that was the world that, you know, I think your generation is probably one of the last ones to really experience that as a whole. I'm Gen X. My generation saw that, was told that's how you work, but then it disappeared. And then it was like these companies, we moved more towards, and I'm not going to get political, but we moved more towards pure, what's what I'm looking for, where we look for money. We went more towards just money, 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 capitalism. We went more towards pure capitalism. We get more percent. And so that disappeared. So the companies were like, nope, I have to fire all these people. You have no job security. You have no stuff. So everyone had to take a step back and go, okay, so what is important to me? Because before, at least there was that carrot of, well, I'm working towards something. I'm working towards this and it's going to pay me off. And we're not going to get into that for the show today, because once again, that's one of those 3-hour shows. But people have to adjust because values change. And that's one thing that during COVID, we saw that we looked at our values and said, man, I was killing myself at work. And for what? Like you were saying, Don, that one more dollar than you could spend, but we were trying to stack all this money up and try to and some people were coming from scarcity. So they were like, oh my goodness, I'm going to run out of money. So I have to work 14-hour days, and I have to work those extra weekends, and I have to do all this. And then their life was suffering. They didn't really step back and say, okay, well, how am I defining success? And then when you looked at it, your definition of success was someone else's definition of success, and you were just playing a role. You were an actor in a show. You weren't the lead. You weren't even the lead character in this movie. You were a bit player, as they used to say, in someone else's movie. And so I think that people are seeing that. The younger generations, I think they're going too far. I think there's some challenges there where, I always say that when sometimes if we want to go from here to here, we don't go here, they're going here though. So that's the challenge, where we have to look at that and do it in a way that, once again, is sustainable, because that life that they're looking at right now, where I'm going to be famous on YouTube, isn't sustainable. It's like kids in a school. Well, I'm going to play in the NBA. Okay, 1% get into the NBA. Maybe you don't hang your dreams on that. Maybe you practice, maybe you do good, but maybe you have a backup plan for that. And I'm not saying don't go after your dreams, because we can do whatever we want within reason. So what I'm seeing with people is that people are reevaluating their lives, and they're really stepping back and going, well, what do I want? What are my goals? What are my hopes and dreams? What's my purpose? I think we're seeing a lot more of that. We saw that in the 70s, kind of how that culture shifted, where, some Eastern traditions came in and people started looking at spirituality differently, and things of that shifted. But I think we're seeing the second biggest shift right now, at least in my lifetime, is where people are really like, okay, so how do I define success? What does that look like? And how do I get there? So helping people along that journey, having that starting with awareness, and then starting on a path. Well, how do you get there? That's been the biggest thing that I've seen with people in the last, 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, that's remarkable, the points you make, because COVID was a great teacher. It was a terrible experience for the whole world, but it made people realize that a lot of people could stay home from work based on not having the expense of going to work. So whether it was childcare, whether it was, dry cleaning, whether it was having that second car, whether it was doing without some things that you didn't want to do, like travel back then. Right. That's why if you look at all the expenses back then, they were primarily inside your house. Furniture sales went up, remodeling went up, so you started to invest in where you were instead of where you used to be. And it also, some people never went back. Some people decided, hey, some people would rather be home with their kids and live in a more modest lifestyle than having to outsource everything, having to deal with all of the issues at work and the politics. You don't know what you're into until you're out of it.
Right.
And then when you look back and you say, how did I ever do that? Or why would I do that? And you don't know, because people are usually creatures of habit. Yeah. People usually just repeat what they just did. And it's kind of like the chicken in the the kernel of corn, where you just keep pecking at it and they keep giving it to you. And, my philosophy, since I never really, except at 15, worked for anybody, was a job was just over broke. And that's where most people are, where they don't have enough to leave, but they have enough to keep maintaining what they have. And sometimes until you get knocked off your horse, do you find out you were on the wrong horse, or you should have got off a long time ago.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't have done it on your own, because most people are competitive, they're fighters. Things get tough, they get tougher. But at a certain point, when do you let your guard down? When do you relax? If you're always at high intensity and attention, you're stressing out, and you're taking what could be a quality life and diminishing it. We've got, Carrie talks about he's at a disadvantage, but Carrie, you're only at the disadvantage you allow yourself to be, because once you label yourself something, you'd continue to maintain that. And once you start talking about yourself, and sometimes it may be fake it till you make it, but it's also putting something out there and saying, I'm getting better. I'm not where I want to be, but I'm making progress, or at least I know what I need to do. I'm trying to figure out what I did wrong to not get hired. The last one said, we like your skills. My skills weren't good enough, so I'm working on more skills. Well, that's a quality direction. What you can't do for others, you can always do for yourself, right? You can always enlist yourself in whatever you want to do. And it could be a health program, it could be a learning program. So key is don't stop trying, but you got to always be your own best friend. And sometimes that's all you have is yourself. We've got this individual who I haven't seen, but welcome. How do success and failure shape our growth and perspective in life? I think it's very essential. I think that's the feedback you get from your actions, is the responses, how people treat you, how people greet you, and how involved you are in situations. And then we've got another individual with an interesting name, Precious. Well, I got to bring Jason back. Precious, I can't exactly pronounce it. Nice to be here. Nice to have you here, Precious. And, everybody learns on their own, at their own rate of learning. And also people learn, like I say, from others. And, it's just, I think people lose perspective, because it's like looking at a kid who you haven't seen in a year, you could see how much they've grown. If you look at a kid that you're with every day, it's insignificant. And that's where you got to look at the long picture and not at the short-term situation. And some things short-term, there's a saying, short-term pain for long-term gain, or short-term gain for long-term pain. You got to choose your poison at sometimes just to get healthy. And I think that's where success comes in, is not what even when people used to come to work for me, I would say, I know money is very important, but it's not how much you make here, it's who you become here, because that's what you'll take with you. Shakespeare said a fool and his money are quickly separated. Don't depend on materialism to get you through, depend on your attributes and your virtues, and also find happiness in small things. When someone can be greatly happy and successful by just the joy of watching a bird fly, or a flower grow, or taste something like a raisin, which is insignificant to most people. But, I think that also lends itself to savoring. How many people ate a meal and forgot what they ate because they were so busy in conversation, or, hey, I got 5 minutes to chow this down. I just need fuel at this point. I don't really have that time. But, I also see, and I've had a lot of wonderful teachers. And one gentleman, actually, his name was Ralph Oates, and he got the Congressional Medal of Freedom, only had a 7th grade education and did quite well with it. And he would always make the point, every time I have a plane to catch, I get there an hour in advance, because I never know what's going to happen on the road. And I don't want to stress.
Right.
And I don't want to get myself worked up and then have to get on a plane or go to a meeting. And it made so much sense to me, because the hour that you're sitting at home waiting to leave because you don't want to get there early.
Right.
And I think punctuality is a matter of respect, because unless you have a situation, in most cases you don't, why'd you have to come 5 minutes late? What were you doing for 5 minutes somewhere this morning or this afternoon that you couldn't have got out there sooner? And it's almost like people just don't want to give more than enough, and that's the way a lot of people work. When you pay me, I'll do more. Instead of, listen, I'm going all out, and
Right.
it's up to you now to appreciate it and reward me, or at least I know it's never going to happen and better test it early than say, well, you gave me this and that's what I'm going to give you. And I think that lends itself to being the better person. And most people can't be that person. And that's important. Carrie comes back and says, I like to watch squirrels. They're so funny. I love monkeys, and I just enjoyed seeing them jump around in a zoo and have a lot of fun. And I think that's important, Carrie, is to know what turns your happiness light on and to participate in it. And squirrels are easy to find. And you found something that's attainable. That's another thing with success. So many people shoot for goals that they could have been happier if they would have went for half as much and been able to be successful and build from it. So Jason, covering a lot of ground in a little bit of time, and hit on a subject that seems to align and relate to a lot of people.
Yeah.
Going forward, what are your new thoughts of happiness and success going to 2025? Because I know everybody's pretty much called it a year, and then now getting prepared hopefully for the next year.
Yeah, we were talking before we got on air and talking about how the year went and what's going for. And the one thing I want to interject here actually is real quick is mindset. We both talked about it in different ways and not use that word, but mindset is so important. And I'm not sure, I've had some issues with my internet here and I popped out that one time, so I'm not sure, but there was a question, and I can't read the name because the writing's small, but how does success and failure shape our growth and perspective in life? And if you were to ask me as a client that, ask me that question, I would say exactly. What do you mean exactly? Success and failure shape your growth and perspective in life, how you allow it to shape your perspective and growth in life. If you see everything as, oh, this is against me and it's not working, it's whatever, that's how it's going to shape your life. But if you look at it and say, oh, I had a little bit of growth here, I had some learnings there, this didn't work out, I'm going to try differently, and I'm going to keep going forward in a positive direction, that's how it's going to shape your life, and that's how it's going to do it. So that's what's very important. So I offer that as we reflect back on, we love to do time frames. We're this human animal that we are. We love to oh, well, 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, 1 year. Life is this continuous flow, and we won't get into what time is or isn't because that's another program. So the quantum days, but we like to look back. So let's look at this year. And when you look at the year, be kind to yourself, be honest with yourself, and be open with yourself and say, hey, this happened, this happened, this happened. Could have done this differently. This was wildly successful. More of this in my future, or you know what, that didn't work out, but I think it still has opportunities for me. So I'm going to keep mining that mine and see what shows up. So as we look back on the year, we have the opportunity to actually be honest with ourselves and look how the year went, and then plan for the future. We talk about building blocks. We talk about that a lot here. Use it as building blocks. And if it was something that didn't work out, you know what? That's a brick too. That's something you can build. Hey, I know what not to do. That's half the game right there. If you know what not to do, that's a great place to be. So take these lessons, take that. Be grateful for every lesson. Be grateful for everything that showed up in your life, all the people that showed up in your life, because everyone teaches us something. They either taught you how to be or taught you how not to be. You know what? I'll take that. Because the sooner you learn what lesson they're teaching you, the sooner you can move on. So reflect on that, as we go into this, we're moving into the new year, reflect on that, reflect on the lessons, and have self-compassion. Take all these lessons and say, well, what can I learn from it? What did I learn from it? And we have ups and downs. That's life. Life is hill and dale. Life's not this. life's this, hopefully, you know, and you get it. And there's times when it's easy to look at the downs and to go, oh my goodness, you know, negativity bias, it's programmed into us, where we look for what's wrong because we were trying to put out fires. Give yourself the grace of not having to always look at putting out fires, and give yourself that grace of saying, I did some really good stuff this year. And even if it's just, I tried, you know, I put effort in, I did some effort. And maybe if my effort's not getting me the results I want, I can adjust my effort. But I respect that I put this effort in, that I didn't sit, you know, they say, my Southern friends say, you don't get lucky sitting in the shade. You got out and you did some stuff. Let's be respectful of that. And beyond all that, celebrate the victories, however small or big they are. Celebrate, and say, you know what? That was awesome. We did a great job. You and your unconscious mind did a great job, you know? So I think that's the opportunity for us to really be there and be present in our lives. So often we get caught up in this whirlwind of doing. You know, I wrote down some notes from some of the great stuff that you had said, Don, talking about a lot of different things, but the ones that are pertinent is, you know, success, but at what cost? You know, if you're always climbing mountains and you don't stop to appreciate the view from time to time, that's lost time. That's lost time, because I guarantee you, when you get to the end of your journey, you're not going to remember all that. You're going to think about the times that you stopped to enjoy the view. So we have to give ourselves that opportunity to stop and enjoy the view on the way up. You know, and I'd rather do it on the way up than the way down.
Yeah, those are very important points. I hope everybody takes note of them. And I think there's something to legacy, you know, is what do you leave behind, or what did you leave while you were here for other people to continue and to be successful. And a lot of people were part of someone's success, but never became successful. The people who opened the road, the people are standing on their shoulders because, you know, they took the hits, they made the sacrifices so their kids could go to school or they could have a better situation. And they could have been selfish and they could have just been focused on themselves. And there's that philosophy, don't make it about you, make it about it, because you take it less personally. And there's a time when you got to give yourself some time to cool off, because if you get caught in the passion of the moment, you're going to react in ways that you would be ashamed of maybe a few days from now. You know, so, you know, respond, don't react. Think about something, especially if it's significant, because, you know, once you say something, it's like you can't unring a bell. You can never take it back. You can apologize and say, oh, I thought this or I thought that, and maybe you'll get a little bit of mileage out of it, but you'll destroy bridges that you might have been able to build. And you got to show yourself as being better than most people expect you to. And I think expectation really forms your reality. You know, if you go to a restaurant saying it's going to be a crummy meal, it's going to be a crummy meal, you're going to find your taste buds will find that crumminess in that meal.
Yeah.
And that's where visualization comes in. That's where seeing a positive result. You know, there was some statistic on auto accidents, and I forgot the number, but it's pretty high. Like 70% of accidents could be avoided if you were focused on the avoidance of it instead of directing yourself to it. Right? If someone cuts in front of you and you just keep driving towards it, you're going to hit it. But if you look to the right and you just swerve to that, you know, you might be able to avoid it. So get off of cruise control, you know, and be aware, be sensitive. And then the question is, when you figured it out, when was it really figured it out? Not when you noticed it or when you didn't want to notice it. How many people make excuses for something that shouldn't have an excuse? Instead of saying it is what it is, well, they didn't really mean it that way, or it'll never happen again. And most people are just avoiding the responsibility and accountability of dealing with something. You can still go along with it, but don't lie to yourself. Don't deceive yourself in thinking something isn't, because then you'll even be more disappointed in yourself and in the other person. And don't make anybody that important in your life that they can affect you that much. And that's why diversification makes so much sense. If you have a bunch of hobbies and a bunch of interests, if you get laid off, where you say, hey, this is my time to catch up on all my fun stuff. I remember the only year I took off when I was about 27, and I left Detroit for Denver. And it was the first time I never worked, and I loved it. And I played tennis and I swam. I did get a real estate license. I mean, I was doing things to help myself. But when I got back into doing what I was doing, I had a full head of steam, and I enjoyed that moment, and that's where a lot of times, vacations come in. And a lot of people don't treat themselves to a vacation. I remember one trip I took with my family, my wife and 2 kids. They were pretty small, and we went out to the western slope near Grand Junction. And for some reason, we stopped in Glenwood Springs. They got one of the largest hot springs in the world, just beautiful out there. Didn't have to, and it was about 60 degrees. And by the time we got out of there, it dropped to 40, it dropped to 30. And then we got to about Vail, and we heard the roads were going to close down. So they're going to close down in front of us and behind us.
Wow.
And they're expecting blizzard temperatures. And, we had a gallon of water and half a fruitcake. And I said to myself, this is going to be a tough night. And I saw an emergency turnaround right in front of me. And I knew this is it. Either take it or you're going to stuck here. And I took it, got off in Vail, and decided I just wanted a viaduct. I said, if we can just park under a viaduct, at least we'll be away from most of the elements.
Right.
And fortunately, we even found a hotel. And then my wife said, nah, this isn't what we don't, it had a Murphy bed. So anyway, I know I'm going into a little detail. I said, geez, just 10 minutes ago, we were stuck on this thing. Then I was hoping for a viaduct. We got a hotel, and now it's not good enough. So she was right. We ended up finding this really beautiful condo. And because everybody was leaving town or left town, it was a really good price. And it was huge. Had dining room, had a shower for 8. It was incredible. So the next morning comes, and everybody's, okay, let's get back on rise. Are you kidding me? We're living the life of leisure here. We ended up 2 more days there and went to a water park that was near there, and it was just phenomenal. So you can turn negative into positive very easily if you're aware of it. And some people would have not taken that cutoff, and I'm always happy I did in order to do that. But it also says stop and smell the roses.
Yeah.
Enjoy the journey. And the other thing is, and that's a lesson I learned, and it's not easy, is when people say, I would never do that for no matter how much money they gave me. Well, until someone puts that money up, do you really know? Everybody's brave until the opportunity. And there was one time when I actually walked away from what could have been generational money. It was so big. But it's only because the people were so vile, and there was no integrity. And I just said, no, I just can't allow myself to do this. And I didn't. And it turned out to be a great decision. But you got to be able to decipher what it is. And, the other thing is people depend on you. Yeah. And I remember when I was making that decision, everybody knew how big it could have been. But they all looked at me, and I could see in their eyes, you're better than this. And we'll support you, whatever you do. And that made all the difference. So, I think when you're making significant decisions, even if it's next year, consult with all the people that are important to you. Share your goals and your ambitions, and say, how does this fit in with you? Because it's better to ask for permission than forgiveness. And I know a lot of people don't want to do that. It's like, I'll do it, and let the chips fall where they may, and I'll make it right. And that's what people try to do. Well, here's a diamond ring for never showing you any attention last year.
Right.
Or, hey, I'm going to send you on a wonderful trip, kids, even though I didn't have 5 minutes when you needed me.
Yeah.
And that's really what's important to you, because that's what you'll live with and grow with, not the money you make. And, at a certain point, if you grow up, I would say, I grew up pretty challenged. I learned to work early.
Yeah.
I mean, I was just saying on yesterday's show, when I was 9, as soon as the snow came, it was money in the pocket. I grab my snow shovel, start walking down that street, knocking on doors, especially older people. And I remember getting a quarter, a driveway, and a sidewalk. At the end of the day, I'd have $2. I was healthier for it. I could take the cold back then a lot better. It was opportunity where someone said, "Oh, geez, it's snowing, I'm stuck inside." And then it just put me on my road of what else can I do?
Right.
And do it for myself. So, when you're working hard for a quarter, you tend to appreciate what $1 is, or $10. I remember when I first got a $5 bill, I put it in my sock and then put my foot in my shoe. So they'd have to kill me to get that $5 before, it was smellier than hell. I didn't have to do that after a while. But
Right.
it just, you reflect back on little things that mean a lot, and knowing that those things will still mean a lot later on. And I really feel sorry for the kids who grew up with a silver spoon, never had to do anything, never had to take care of anything. Everything was given to them. And when they turn out to be older, they're helpless. They're defenseless. They don't know how to survive.
Right.
So, early adversity is a gift if you take it the right way. And when you're living with people or just scraping by, you're out of line for even asking for something, because you know how hard they work for it and how important it is to put food on a table, and you just get a look like, we don't have it. And if we had it, we weren't going to spend it that way, and the idea was you're going to get a roof, you're going to get food and clothes, and the rest is on you. Made me, and there were people like me. So you find out I always had a friend. We'd go out shoveling together, right? And it'd be a fun time. We'd end up making the $2, spending maybe half of it on candy or doing something like that. But it showed that we didn't need anybody. We could depend on ourselves. And if the door closes, there's another door you can find that opens. And that's perseverance and tenacity.
Right.
And fun, right? Because who's going to get hurt shoveling snow versus sitting inside? I mean, I went into a long diatribe, if you want to call it that. But it is, the beauty of these conversations and these shows is it brings up memories because of someone else bringing up a point that you
Right.
needed to stimulate that memory or bring it back to life. And now you relearn it and reappreciate it later on. And one last thing I'll say is I'm starting to appreciate how many people have done shows here. And I was just talking with Carl yesterday and Kelly, and how much this amplifies to people you never even knew watched the show. And what's even more impressive is now all of the shows I've done, which about 900, have almost 50,000 views collectively. Wow. And I've never done a thing, and they're all hour shows. But what it does say is if you watched Star Wars, right, you'll see the next Star Wars. So if you're watching an hour show, you'll watch another hour show. If you ever get the repurposing and getting the 2-minute clips, you get even more. So you never know what you don't know. You can't count the score unless the game's over. And you get surprised by things that you might have taken for granted. And you got to give yourself credit for everything, even for the things you don't have. And one last thing, the definition of faith is the belief in the invisible.
Right.
Knowing there's more than what you see or feel at the time, and give yourself a chance of not taking yourself out of the game too early. So Jason, time to catch my breath.
Get a little sip of something. Great points, and I love the stories. And yeah, it's so true. Like the community portion is what's amazing, and I'm going to get back to that here in a second. But starting from the beginning, Well, I love the story about having to pull over because there's so many lessons in that. It's just a metaphor for a lot of different things and persevering and taking a step forward. And well, I'm going to be happy with this. Well, why don't we try for this? And I know that by not going for that one just cover and looking for that first hotel or going to that second location, you weren't putting yourself in danger. That's the thing I think that people need to know is that you had a backup plan and you were safe. You weren't just like forging forward and we're just going to leave this hotel that we're not really crazy about and we might end up sleeping in the car. That wasn't the plan. You still could go back to that hotel, I would assume, and back it up. So, we take those risks, but they're calculated risks. So I love that. And that's how we get to success. The one thing that I want to go back to the shoveling snow, and it's about I talked about mindset. What did you take from that story? I had fun. I made money. I remember those quarters. I remember my friend that joined me. I got out of the house. You're not like, oh, and it was freezing cold and I had to do it and it was miserable and blah, blah. It's easy to get in that place where we look at all the the bad stuff and we look at the negatives of a situation but you didn't. That wasn't your story. Your story was, I was 9. I was an entrepreneur at a young age, making money for myself. I took advantage. I got outside. I got out of the house, got some exercise. That's the shift. That's the shift because at that point next season, you're excited when the snow started to drop. You're like, yes, where's my shovel? Let's go. You weren't like, oh man, snow, I have to go and shovel snow again. I have to. And there's days, I get that. Like I always try to put that out there. We're not judging people. We're all at where we're at. This stuff has taken both of us a lot of years, and I'm still working on it. We're all a work in progress. So I'm not here to say, oh, well, I do all this perfectly. Trust me, I have my days. And my inner voice, my middle name is Paul, and so I say, Jason Paul, you know better, or Jason Paul, stop thinking that way. That's my conversation inside because it shows up. I'm human. We're all humans, but it's like a muscle. The more you do it, the easier it gets. So the more we focus on the positives, the more we focus on the little wins, the easier that gets to focus on the little wins. The more we focus on the negatives, the more we focus on the not so great, the losses, so to speak, it's easier to see those. So that's what's very important. That's why I love that story is like, what you take away from these events is so important. The other thing is going way back to earlier, talking about, people passing at 27. I think what that reminded me of is, and you just said something too that reminded me of who you surround yourself with. This community that you've built, you've surrounded yourself with, if I do say so myself, some really good people. And I love the community. I love the folks. I love the people that come and bring us comments and join in. And, as new talkers come in and new people come here and join the conversation, it's amazing. But it's important who you surround yourself with. If like you said, if you're the smartest person in the room, look for another room. And I think that's the challenge, not to go long-winded on this to that point about the 27-year-old thing is, but these people that get fame young, they get surrounded by people that are trying to attach themselves and get some of that. So they're saying, yes, you're great. Yes, look at, it's always interesting to me when people look at actors and sports stars and musicians and they're like, oh, they're not good. This person's not a good person. Well, why would they be any different than just a regular civilian on the street? That there's good people and there's not so good people. Just because they're talented doesn't mean they're necessarily a good person. And that's what happens, though, is that bubble becomes an echo chamber where everyone's telling these people, you're great, you can do no wrong, you're wonderful. And then so they keep pushing those boundaries and people keep letting them go, pushing those boundaries. And so, you've got someone that's been scouted and for football since they were 13 years old. Well, when they're 22 and in the NFL, how is that going to affect their mindset and their how they think and see the world? They've been catered to and handed, not everyone, but as an example, been catered to and handed everything and told how great they are and all this money's being thrown at them and all this fame and stuff. That's a slippery slope because it's easy to believe your own hype. Don't believe your own press, as they say. So be careful who you surround yourself with. That's the key to sustainable success. Anyone can have that short burst, but then if you burn the house down or burn those bridges, as they say, or burn the boats, that's a long walk home. You know, it's a long walk back. So surround yourself with people that will push you to say, hey, that wasn't great, or hey, let's see how can I help you do better, or I'm the example. You know, like we all could be examples for each other. So I think there's a lot of keys there for success. Is that it's a mindset, and it's who you surround yourself with. You know, there's a lot of the 7 people, the 5 people, whatever that you surround yourself with, is you're the accumulation of all of that. That's very important. And, you know, as we get to the hour here, and you know, I know Dave wasn't able to join us, and Kelly looks like obviously not going to join us. So, but it's been great having one-on-one time with you, Don. I'll say this: the one thing that came to mind when we start talking about success is, and I'm going to paraphrase because I can't remember the exact saying. It's been a lot of years, but Casey Kasem. If you remember the top 40 on the radio, Casey Kasem was with us for before I was a kid, before I was born, and after in my youth, you know, Casey Kasem. But he said something to the effect of, you know, keep your feet on the ground and keep reaching for the stars. And I think that's the key. Have that big, audacious goal. Have that idea of success that's big, but be firmly planted on the earth. Know where you're at, know where you're going, and take a moment to observe and respect and honor those small wins as you're going towards the stars.
Yeah, that is really, really important what you just mentioned. I do remember Casey Kasem, and I probably remember him when he started, not just when he finished. Um, but it also says be versatile, be able to be successful in the small game and the big game.
Yeah.
Be able to be a quality person for everybody you meet, not just for the elite, because you know you meet the same people on the way down as you meet on the way up.
Yeah.
And you can't forget that. And people remember the quality things you might have done or said to them when you didn't have to. Because, you know, Shaq's a great example.
Yeah.
He always looks for opportunities to help people. If he's in a store, and he was in a store, and a guy was trying to pick out a wedding engagement ring for his fiance, and he heard him like, well, we can't afford that. And as soon as he heard that, he said, not a problem. I'm going to take care of it for you. You know, and what his father did was ground him really early. His dad was a military guy. He actually learned basketball out in Germany, found a guy who really wanted to mentor him, and got into Orlando after a year at LSU. And huge guy, wonderful, magnificent basketball individual. And he called his dad up after a couple of games and said, you know, I missed this and I missed this and all this. And his dad said, hey, come on over right now. And it was like 1 a.m. And he said, okay. And he comes over. He was pretty obedient. And his dad said, get in the car with me. And they drove to some slum neighborhood and just drove and found somebody who was sitting on the, the stairwell. And he says, go up to that person and ask them what they're dealing with. And the person says, well, we're going to get tossed out of our apartment or whatever, and we don't have this and we don't have this. And he got back in the car, told his dad, he said, well, go back there and take care of them. And he said, okay. And he told the guy, next few days, I'm going to make some phone calls and I'm going to, get you set up. And he got him in a new place and blah, blah, blah. And his dad says, he's the person who has something to complain about. What do you complain about? You're getting $4 million a year. You're playing the game you love. You got nothing to deal with. And in those situations, he ended up becoming the biggest big brother and big sister contributor in the world.
Yeah.
And he's now worth $500 million. So by giving away a lot of money, it hasn't hurt him at all, but it made him appreciate things so much more than if his dad wouldn't have taught him that lesson that evening. Yeah. And how many lessons can you learn? And even my little snow route, it became, I got to know these people. I had a route. They loved to see me, and pretty soon they needed house painting. Pretty soon they needed moving. I had an income stream that was automatic, and it taught me how to deal with people, how to be appreciative. And there were people who could hardly give me the quarter. I do remember, I know we're at the end, but there was this old couple, no matter what I did, it was never enough. do the lawn, do this. And as soon as I got done, well, if you want your quarter, you're going to have to do the backyard. For some reason, I kept going back to them, but
Yeah.
it did teach me that. We've got a individual here I haven't seen, Lally Pia. Like your comments about celebrities. You know, there's lessons to be learned from everything and everybody. And, you know, the key is always try to be better and always try to do better. And wherever you are, you can add one more layer to it. You know, if you ran a mile in 4 minutes, try to shave 5 seconds off of it. Take little things like whatever you do and find yourself successful at it. While you're waiting for the big things to happen, do whatever little things you can do. So we're right at an hour. Jason, last words?
Remember to celebrate the small wins, set your definition for what your success is, and go out there and take action.
Yeah, you're so right. Action is key. Too many people thinking, procrastinating when the time's right. The time is now. The time is always right. It's you that needs to be right with the time.
Yes.
And doing anything get you out of yourself. You know, a busy person doesn't have time to think about themselves. They're too busy doing things. And people who volunteer in emergencies, the last thing they think about is their sore toe or something. You know, when a fireman's rushing in to save somebody in a building, they don't have time or interest in any of that. So, you know, learn from other people. The busier you are, the happier you'll be. And that is a fact. You know, like Jason says, you know, don't sit in the shade from his Southern friends. With that, time to say goodbye for now. Come back Tuesday. We'll have Beverly Glazer with us. Next Wednesday, we'll have Carl Dakin. And hopefully next Thursday, we'll have Kelly, Dave, and Jason with us. But, you know, all it takes is two. I couldn't do this show by myself, and I wouldn't want to do it because it's a vacuum. And you can't throw yourself the ball and catch it and have a good time when you could do it with someone else or someone's else. With that, take care. Have a wonderful day ahead. And until I see you Tuesday,